She moved closer on the couch, close enough that her perfume filled my senses. Do young guys still find me attractive? Hello, I'm James. I'm 27, finishing my PhD in literature. I was house-sitting for my professor when her best friend showed up at the door crying, beautiful and completely lost. The storm had knocked out the power. We'd opened wine, started talking in the dark. Now she was asking the question that would change everything. I knew my answer could hurt her or heal her, and I'd never been more careful with my words. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. I'd fallen into an easy rhythm at Professor Chun's house over the past week. The old craftsman had its own heartbeat creaks in the wooden floors that marked the hours. The way afternoon light slanted through leaded glass windows, casting patterns I'd started to anticipate. Even her temperamental cat, Morris, had begun treating me like a tolerable intruder rather than a mortal enemy. The orchids were the trickiest part of my house-sitting duties. Professor Chun had left 3 pages of detailed instructions about their care, with specific warnings underlined twice in red ink. Too much water would rot the roots. Too little would doom them entirely. I'd check them morning and evening, misting some, giving others precisely measured amounts of water. It felt like a ritual, one that brought unexpected peace to my days. Tonight was meant to be like any other grading papers in the study, while Maurice ignored me from his perch on the window seat. The essays weren't great, but they weren't terrible either. Just freshman compositions about modernist literature that missed the point in predictable ways. I'd settled into the leather armchair, red pen ready, when the doorbell shattered the quiet dot. It was 9 o'clock. No one had come by all week. I hesitated, then set aside the stack of papers and went to check. Through the beveled glass panels flanking the front door, I could make out a woman's silhouette. When I opened it, the porch light illuminated someone who looked distinctly out of place on a Thursday night in this quiet academic neighborhood. Her black dress was clearly expensive but wrinkled, as if she'd been wearing it too long. Dark hair fell across her face, and when she pushed it back, I noticed her makeup was slightly smeared, eyes reddened like she'd been crying. "I'm so sorry to intrude," she said, her voice steady despite her appearance. "I'm Sophia Elena's friend from college. She said I could use her guest room during the conference this week." Something clicked in my memory. Professor Chun had mentioned a friend going through a divorce who might need the room next month. The timing was off, but the scattered way Professor Chun handled her calendar made this scenario entirely possible. "I'm James," I said. "I'm actually house-sitting for Elena while she's at the symposium in Toronto. She didn't mention anyone would be staying here." Sophia's laugh was hollow, more exhaustion than humor. Of course she didn't. Classic Elena double-booking and forgetting to tell anyone. She shifted her weight, adjusting her grip on an overnight bag that looked as expensive as her dress. "I should have called first. I'll find a hotel." The defeat in her voice made something twist in my chest. Here was someone who'd clearly had a rough night, maybe a rough few months, counting on finding sanctuary with a friend. I thought about her trying to find a decent hotel at this hour, sitting alone in some sterile room. "No, please come in," I said, stepping aside. "There's plenty of room, and Professor Chen would want you to stay. She mentioned you might be visiting. just had the timing mixed up. Sophia hesitated at the threshold. You're sure? I don't want to make things awkward. Not at all, I assured her, though I wasn't entirely sure why I felt so certain about welcoming this stranger into the house. Something in her expression, vulnerability wrapped in careful dignity, made me want to help. Let me take your bag. The guest room's upstairs, and I can make some tea if you'd like. She stepped inside, the soft click of her heels on hardwood joining the house's familiar sounds. Thank you, she said quietly. I really am sorry about this. I caught a hint of her perfume as she passed, something elegant but subtle, like gardenias at dusk. Morris appeared at the top of the stairs, tail twitching with curiosity at our visitor. For some reason, my heart was beating faster than the situation warranted. I woke at dawn, momentarily disoriented by a sound from downstairs. For a few seconds, I wondered if I'd dreamed the late-night visitor. It wouldn't be the first time my imagination had gotten away from me during a lonely house-sitting stint. But then I heard the distinct clink of a mug against Elena's granite countertop, and reality settled back in. After pulling on jeans and running a hand through my perpetually messy hair, I made my way downstairs. The morning light streamed through the kitchen windows, catching Sophia as she moved through the space with the ease of long familiarity. She'd transformed from last night's rumpled elegance into casual comfort, dark jeans and a soft gray cardigan that looked more expensive than my entire wardrobe. Her hair was pulled back, revealing delicate silver earrings that caught the light when she turned. Good morning, she said, spotting me in the doorway. I hope I didn't wake you. I found Elena's coffee beans. Some things never change. She's still hiding them behind the flour. You know her well, I said, accepting the mug she offered. The coffee was perfect, better than what I'd been making all week. I really should find a hotel, she continued, her fingers tracing the rim of her own mug. Elena clearly forgot about the timing, and I don't want to impose on your space. The way she said it struck me practiced self-effacement, like someone who'd spent years making herself smaller to fit others' expectations. Please stay, I said, surprising myself with how firmly it came out. Really, the house is huge, and I'm just using the study to grade papers. Professor Chun would be horrified if I let you leave. Something in her expression softened. You're sure, absolutely. I gestured to the breakfast nook. Tell me how you met Elena. Sophia settled into the window seat, tucking one leg under her. First day of freshman year at Wellesley. I was this painfully proper East Coast girl, and in walks Elena wearing combat boots with her pleated skirt, announcing she was going to revolutionize literary criticism. Her laugh was genuine this time, warm with memory. She drove my roommate. Crazy, always bursting in at midnight with some new theory about Virginia Woolf. That sounds exactly like her, I said, thinking of my advisor's legendary enthusiasm. 30 years of friendship, and she hasn't changed a bit. Sophia took a sip of coffee. Still creating chaos wherever she goes. Though sometimes, she glanced at me with a hint of mischief, her chaos works out for the best. What about you? She asked. Elena mentioned you're working on your thesis, something about modernist literature. I found myself explaining my research on authentic voice in modernist texts, surprised by how easily the words came. Usually, I stumbled when describing my work, too aware of my family's disappointment in my career change. But Sophia asked thoughtful questions, drawing out ideas I'd been struggling to articulate. As morning stretched toward noon, we fell into an unexpectedly comfortable rhythm. The conversation flowed naturally between literature, Elena's adventures, and random observations about the house's quirks. "I should probably tackle some paperwork," she said eventually, her expression clouding slightly. "Divorce proceedings, not exactly light reading." "The dining room has great light," I offered, recognizing her reluctance to retreat to solitude. "And better chairs than the study? I've got essays to grade if you want company." The relief in her smile was unmistakable. "That would be nice, actually. Better than staring at these documents alone in a hotel room." The next day settled into an unexpected rhythm, as natural as if we'd known each other for years instead of hours. Morning found us back in Elena's sunny kitchen, where Sophia's stories about their college days painted a different picture of my usually intimidating advisor. "You have to understand," Sophia said, her eyes bright with memory as she poured us both coffee. Elena wasn't always the distinguished department chair. During our sophomore year, she led a midnight protest because the library wouldn't extend hours during finals. She actually chained herself to the front doors. Professor Chun, the same woman who makes first years cry during thesis proposals? The very same. Though back then, she was sporting pink hair and combat boots. Sophia's laugh was infectious. The dean had to come down at 2 in the morning to negotiate. Elena ended up getting everything she wanted: extended hours and a 24-hour study room. These glimpses of young Elena made me see my mentor differently, more human somehow. I found myself sharing my own stories of her infamous office hours, making Sophia laugh with tales of Elena's theatrical reactions to particularly creative student interpretations. As afternoon crept in, we naturally drifted into our own work. Sophia spread her legal documents across the dining room table, a rainbow of colored tabs appearing as she worked through each stack. I settled in the living room with my students' papers, close enough that we shared the same space, but far enough for focus. I couldn't help noticing her unconscious habits, the way she twisted her wedding ring, still worn but moved to her right hand, or how she tucked her hair behind her ear whenever she concentrated particularly hard on a document. Sometimes she'd pause, staring out the window with a distant expression that made me want to ask what she was thinking. When evening arrived, I realized neither of us had eaten since morning. "I usually walk Max around this time," I said, breaking our comfortable silence. "He's the neighbor's golden retriever. They let me borrow him sometimes when they work late." Her face lit up. "A dog walk sounds perfect." She stopped, then continued more quietly. "My ex got custody of our two. It's been strange, coming home to quiet." The evening air was cooling as we walked, Max's leash loose in my hand as he trotted ahead. Something about the gathering dusk made it easier to talk. "Your parents are lawyers, right?" Sophia asked, remembering a detail I'd mentioned earlier. "Elena said something about you leaving law school?" Usually, this topic made me tense, but her tone held genuine curiosity without judgment. 3 years of trying to be who they wanted, I admitted. Had a breakdown during finals second year. Realized I couldn't spend my life arguing cases when all I wanted was to talk about books. "That takes courage," she said softly. walking away from the expected path. My parents still introduce me as their future lawyer at country club events. I tried to keep my voice light, but Sophia caught the undertone. "But teaching makes you happy?" she asked. "I've seen how you light up talking about your students." "It does. Even when they write papers claiming Hemingway was actually optimistic about human nature." Her laugh echoed in the quiet street. As we turned back toward Elena's house, the porch light welcomed us through the growing darkness. "I should cook something," Sophia said, but her tone suggested obligation rather than enthusiasm. "To thank you for letting me stay." "Or," I countered, pulling out my phone, "I know every decent takeout place in walking distance. There's this Thai place that does amazing pad see ew." Her smile was immediate and genuine. "That sounds perfect, actually." The Thai takeout containers sat empty on the coffee table as I sprawled across the living room floor, surrounded by thesis chapter drafts. I'd been staring at the same paragraph for 20 minutes, trying to make sense of my own argument about authenticity in modernist voice. The words had started swimming on the page. "You look like you could use a break." I glanced up to find Sophia in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of wine. She'd changed into soft loungewear, her feet bare against the hardwood floor. The sight made her seem more vulnerable somehow, more real than the polished woman who'd arrived 2 nights ago. That obvious? I ran a hand through my hair, knowing it probably stood on end from how many times I'd done that tonight. "You've been sighing loudly enough to wake Elena's cat." She smiled, crossing to hand me one of the glasses. "Want to talk it through? Sometimes hearing yourself explain it helps." I took a sip of wine, a good red, probably from Elena's private collection, and tried to organize my thoughts. It's this chapter on authentic voice in modernist literature. I can feel what I'm trying to say, but getting it onto paper. "May I?" She gestured to the scattered pages. "I'm not an academic, but I've spent 20 years negotiating contracts. I know unclear communication when I see it. Be my guest." I gathered the pages, suddenly self-conscious about my cramped handwriting in the margins. "Though I should warn you, it's pretty dense." Sophia settled onto the far end of the couch, tucking her feet under her as she began to read. I pretended to grade papers, but found myself watching her instead. She had a lawyer's focus, complete absorption, slight frown of concentration, occasionally making small sounds of consideration. Her free hand toyed absently with her necklace as she read. The minutes stretched in comfortable silence. I noticed how the lamplight caught the silver strands in her dark hair, how naturally she fit into this quiet evening scene. "Okay," she said finally, looking up. "I see what you're trying to do here. But you've buried your strongest points in the middle of page 12. She leaned forward, flipping through pages covered in her own neat annotations. "See this argument about performance versus authenticity? That should be your opening framework." I moved closer, amazed at how clearly she'd parsed my tangled thoughts. Her marginalia was precise, insightful, catching logical gaps even Elena had missed. She'd drawn clean lines, connecting related points across different sections, revealing a structure I hadn't seen. "This is actually brilliant," I said, reaching for the pages she held out. Our fingers brushed during the exchange. A simple touch, but neither of us pulled away immediately. The contact lingered, charged with sudden awareness. I could feel the slight tremor in her hand, see how her breath caught. Then she withdrew quickly, tucking her hair behind her ear. "It's getting late. I should let you work." But she didn't move to leave. Instead, she asked about my next chapter. And somehow we fell into talking about writing, about ambition, about the courage it takes to choose an unexpected path. The wine disappeared as midnight approached, our conversation flowing easily in the lamp-lit quiet. "I admire that you knew what you wanted," she said softly. "That you were brave enough to change course when law school wasn't right." "What about you?" I asked. "Starting over at 46, that takes its own kind of courage." She looked down at her empty wine glass. "I'm still learning how to be brave." When she finally said goodnight, something had shifted between us, subtle but undeniable. Like a door opening, just a crack to let in new light. We both felt it, though neither of us acknowledged it aloud. The sky had darkened ominously during my grocery run, and fat raindrops started falling just as I made it back to Elena's house. I barely got the bags inside before the first crack of thunder shook the windows. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged us into darkness. Perfect timing. Sophia called from somewhere in the living room. I was just looking for Elena's emergency candles. My eyes adjusted slowly to find her silhouette moving through the house, lighter in hand, bringing warm circles of light to life on various surfaces. The storm cast dramatic shadows through the windows, making the space feel smaller, more intimate. "Elena and her candle obsession finally comes in handy," I said, following the sound of Sophia's quiet laughter. "Though I'm pretty sure some of these are from her goth phase in graduate school. Oh, you don't know the half of it." Sophia's face appeared in the candlelight, eyes sparkling with amusement. "I have photographic evidence of that phase somewhere." She held up a bottle of wine. "I bought this as a thank you gift, but it seems like the perfect storm survival necessity now." I found myself studying how the flickering light played across her features as she poured 2 glasses. She'd let her hair down today, and it fell in soft waves past her shoulders. The storm intensified outside, rain lashing against the windows, while thunder rolled overhead. We settled onto the couch, the candles creating a warm bubble of light around us. The wine was excellent, definitely not from the grocery store selection I usually bought. Something about the darkness made conversation flow easier, like we were in our own private world. "You know what's strange?" Sophia swirled the wine in her glass. "I spent 20 years attending charity galas and country club events, perfecting the right smile, saying the right things. But I felt invisible the entire time." She paused, taking a slow sip. "One day I looked in the mirror and realized I'd disappeared into someone else's life completely." The raw honesty in her voice made my chest tight. "I understand that feeling in a different way," I found myself saying. During law school, I'd have panic attacks before mock trials. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think. But I kept pushing through, because it was what everyone expected. I touched the small scar on my palm, an old nervous habit. My parents still introduce me as their future lawyer's son at their club, even though I left 3 years ago. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating her face. She'd turned toward me, one leg tucked under her on the couch. "You're young enough to change course many more times," she said softly, but there was something wistful in her tone that made my heart ache. The storm pressed closer around the house, making our candlelit circle feel even more separate from the outside world. I noticed Sophia had shifted position slightly, the distance between us on the couch smaller than before. Her fingers traced the rim of her wine glass absently. "Can I ask you something?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. She didn't wait for my response. Do men your age, could they really find women like me attractive? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with vulnerability. The candlelight caught the silver threads in her hair, the elegant line of her neck as she looked down, not meeting my eyes. Thunder rumbled overhead, but the storm felt very far away in that moment. I struggled to find the right words, conscious of how much weight they carried. "Sophia, you're brilliant. The way you caught those thesis gaps no one else saw. And beautiful doesn't begin to—" The words caught in my throat as she shifted closer on the couch, near enough that her perfume, something expensive and subtle that reminded me of warm amber, filled my senses. Before I could finish my fumbling reassurance, she closed the remaining distance between us. Her lips met mine with gentle hesitation, a butterfly-soft kiss that ended almost before I registered it happening. She pulled back immediately, eyes wide with what looked like panic. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," she breathed, pushing away slightly. "That was completely inappropriate. You're Elena's student, and I shouldn't have. There are boundaries, and I've just violated all of them." The words tumbled out faster and faster, her hands twisting together in her lap. "Sophia." I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "First, I'm 27, not some undergraduate. And technically, I'm Elena's former student. I graduated last year." I watched this information sink in, saw her shoulders relax slightly. "Also, ... I leaned forward slowly, deliberately, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to. She didn't. Instead, she met me halfway. This second kiss was different, mutual, intentional. Like a conversation where both participants suddenly discovered they spoke the same language. Her hand came up to rest against my chest, and I could feel her fingers curling slightly into my shirt. My own hand found its way to her waist, steadying us both. When we finally separated, she didn't go far. Her forehead rested against mine while we caught our breath, sharing the same small space. The storm continued its percussion outside, but it felt distant and unimportant compared to the sound of our slightly uneven breathing. "We should probably talk about this," she whispered, though she made no move to pull away. "About what it means. Elena comes back tomorrow, and ... She trailed off, but I understood all the unspoken complications in that silence. "You're right," I agreed, even though every instinct wanted to keep kissing her instead of having what promised to be a very complicated conversation. "We should definitely talk about it." Neither of us moved. We stayed frozen in that moment of possibility, her forehead still touching mine, my hand still at her waist, her fingers still lightly gripping my shirt. The candlelight flickered around us, casting dancing shadows on the walls. We were suspended there, balanced perfectly between choice and consequence, neither pulling away nor moving closer. I could feel her breath against my lips, smell that subtle perfume that was becoming familiar, see every detail of her face in the warm light. The silver threads in her hair caught the candlelight like stars. Time seemed to stretch out around us, waiting patiently for whatever we decided to do next. The candlelight made everything feel both more intimate and more surreal as we slowly pulled back, though not completely apart. Sophia's fingers were still lightly twisted in my shirt, anchoring us in this moment of transition between impulse and consideration. "We should probably address the obvious," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine with remarkable steadiness despite the slight tremor in her voice. "I'm 46, James, old enough to be your ... She trailed off, unwilling to complete that particular comparison. "But you're not," I pointed out gently. "You're Sophia." "Just Sophia." A small smile touched her lips. "Just Sophia." I haven't been just anything in a very long time. She finally released my shirt, smoothing the fabric where her fingers had gripped. I can't help wondering if this is terribly cliché, the divorcing woman having some sort of midlife crisis with a younger man. Is that what this feels like to you? I asked, genuinely curious rather than defensive. She considered this carefully. No, she admitted. This feels alive. I haven't felt this alive in years. That's what scares me, actually. The intensity of it. I understand being scared of intensity, I said, thinking back to those moments in law school when panic had overwhelmed me. Since leaving law school, I've been careful, calculated. Everything in my academic life is measured, controlled. But with you, I ran a hand through my hair, searching for the right words. With you, I find myself wanting to take risks I normally wouldn't consider. Elena will have opinions, Sophia pointed out, though her hand had found its way back to my knee. Elena always has opinions, I replied, earning a genuine laugh from her. But she's also the one who taught me about authentic voice in literature, about being true to your narrative. And what's your narrative saying? Her question was barely above a whisper. That some complications are worth exploring. I covered her hand with mine. But only if we're both comfortable with where this might lead. We talked through boundaries then, surprising ourselves with our directness. She admitted her hesitation about physical intimacy after 20 years with one person. I shared my concerns about maintaining professional credibility in academia. We took turns voicing doubts while the other listened and reassured, the conversation flowing between practical concerns and the undeniable pull we felt toward each other. Finally, Sophia stood, smoothing her slacks with slightly shaking hands. I should go to the guest room, she said, though her tone carried more resignation than conviction. It's the right thing to do, the safe thing. I didn't protest or try to stop her. This had to be her choice, made freely and without pressure. She walked to the doorway, one hand resting on the frame, but didn't continue through it. The silence stretched between us, filled with the sound of rain against windows and distant thunder. I spent 20 years doing the right thing, she said. Finally, her back still turned to me. Her voice was quiet but clear. 20 years of charity galas and country club memberships and being the perfect corporate wife. Always doing what was expected. Her fingers tightened on the doorframe. Maybe just once. Maybe just this once. I want to choose what I want, instead of what I should want. I crossed the room with measured steps, each one deliberate and weighted with meaning. The floorboards creaked softly beneath my feet, a gentle percussion accompanying my approach. Every step gave Sophia time to reconsider, to walk through that doorway and end this moment before it truly began. But she didn't leave. Instead, she turned to face me, the last traces of candlelight catching in her dark eyes. We met in the middle of the doorway, that liminal space between decision and consequence. Close enough now that I could detect the subtle notes of her perfume mingling with the rain-washed air drifting through the window. Are you sure? I asked softly, needing to hear it explicitly. Not just for propriety's sake, but because I needed to know this was truly her choice. We don't have to. Yes, she interrupted, her voice carrying a clarity that seemed to ring through the quiet house. It wasn't the impulsive answer of someone caught in a moment, but rather the measured response of someone who had weighed every consideration. I'm sure, James, I'm not fragile and I'm not confused. I know exactly what I'm choosing. The confidence in her tone made something settle in my chest, a warmth that spread outward. So do I replied, matching her certainty. I know this might look impulsive from the outside, but it's not. Not for me. We stood there, so close I could feel the rhythm of her breathing, yet still not touching. The air between us felt charged, like the aftermath of the storm that had now passed beyond us, leaving everything feeling clean and new. Through the windows, I could see stars beginning to emerge in patches of clearing sky, as if the universe itself was offering quiet witness to this moment. Sophia lifted her hand to my face, and I noticed how steady it was, no tremor of uncertainty, no hesitation in her touch as her fingers traced along my jaw. I haven't felt this sure about anything in years, she said, her eyes never leaving mine. That should probably frighten me, but it doesn't. I covered her hand with mine where it rested against my cheek, feeling the slight coolness of her skin, warming beneath my palm. We remained there, poised in that doorway between the guest room and the hallway, between what was proper and what was possible. The moment stretched around us like a held breath, this threshold we were about to cross together. The house settled into midnight silence around us, but it felt alive with potential. Every small sound, the distant drip of rain from the eaves, the whisper of fabric as Sophia shifted closer, the soft catch in my breath as her other hand found my waist seemed amplified in the quiet. Time felt both suspended and racing forward, each second stretching endlessly while simultaneously rushing us toward whatever came next. Standing there, I was acutely aware of every detail, the lingering scent of rain in the air, the way her silver-streaked hair caught the last of the candlelight, the steady pressure of her hand beneath mine. This wasn't just attraction or impulse, it was recognition, a mutual understanding that some chances were worth taking, some rules worth breaking. We stood balanced on that edge together, neither pushing forward nor stepping back, letting the weight of our choice settle around us. Avend us. Everything that had led us here, her marriage's end, my academic detour, Elena's double booking, even the storm seemed less like coincidence and more like convergence. Not fate, exactly, but the kind of moment that comes from being brave enough to recognize what you want and honest enough to reach for it. I led Sophia down the hallway toward what was technically Elena's guest room, though it had become mine over the past weeks of house-sitting. Every sound felt magnified in the quiet house, our footsteps on hardwood, the brush of clothing, even our measured breathing. The domesticity of it all, walking someone to my temporary bedroom, made everything feel simultaneously surreal and achingly normal. Inside, a lamp cast warm light over the evidence of my stay books, stacked 3 deep on the nightstand, laptop glowing softly from its perch on rumpled covers. Sophia's eyes swept the room, taking in details, and a small smile played at her lips when she saw the reading material. 3 books at once? She asked, picking up the top volume. Her voice was soft but steady, helping to ground us both in the familiar territory of literary discussion. I get restless sticking to just one, I admitted, watching as she traced the spine of my worn copy of Virginia Woolf. Different books for different moods. And what mood calls for To the Lighthouse at? She checked the bookmark placement. 3 in the morning. The teasing in her voice made something loosen in my chest. This was still us. The same people who'd spent days sharing coffee and conversation. The same woman who'd helped untangle my thesis arguments and walked a borrowed dog through summer rain. She moved to the bed, where my laptop displayed a half-finished paragraph. With careful movements, she closed it, the soft click echoing in the quiet room. "Work can wait," she said simply, setting it aside. We moved slowly, deliberately, every action wrapped in unspoken questions and answers. I reached for her, pausing just short of contact until she nodded. When she kissed me, it was different from our earlier urgency in the living room, slower, more intentional. My hands found her waist while hers traced patterns on my shoulders, each touch carrying the weight of choice rather than impulse. "Is this okay?" I whispered against her temple, hyper-aware of every small reaction. She hummed agreement, but I kept checking, watching her face, reading the subtle shifts in her expression. My limited past experiences felt like rough drafts compared to this careful exploration, this mutual discovery. Something changed in Sophia as we continued. The polished exterior she'd worn like armor since arriving began to soften. Gone was the perfectly composed woman who'd appeared on Elena's doorstep, replaced by someone more immediate, more real. Her laughter when our noses bumped was genuine, unguarded. Her sighs carried no performance, just pure response. We took our time, treating each moment as complete in itself. There was no rush, no need to define what this meant beyond the boundaries of this night. Each touch, each whispered confirmation became its own small perfection. existing outside the complications waiting in daylight. Later, much later, we lay quietly as false dawn began to paint the eastern sky in subtle grays. Neither of us spoke, unwilling to disturb the peaceful bubble we'd created. Sophia's fingers traced abstract patterns on my arm while I played with her hair, now completely freed from its usual neat arrangement. The silver strands mixed with dark caught what little light filtered through the windows, creating their own constellation against the pillow. Morning would come soon, enough with its necessary conversations and decisions. But for now, we had this pocket of time that belonged solely to us. The quiet house held our secrets, and even Elena's temperamental cat seemed to respect our privacy, his usual pre-dawn howling conspicuously absent. I watched shadows shift on the ceiling, memorizing details I wanted to keep: the weight of Sophia's head on my shoulder, the rhythm of her breathing, the faint scent of her perfume now mixed with sleep and intimacy. Her fingers continued their lazy patterns on my skin, writing messages neither of us needed to decode. We both knew dawn would bring reality crashing back. Elena's imminent return, the complexities of our age difference, the fresh wounds of Sophia's divorce, my academic career. But in these hours between night and morning, we allowed ourselves to exist in the simple truth of touch and presence, each second precious precisely because it asked nothing beyond itself. I woke slowly, consciousness returning in gentle waves. The space beside me was empty, but still held warmth, and somewhere in the house, I could hear movement, quiet, deliberate sounds that meant I hadn't dreamed last night. The bedside clock showed 7:15. Early morning light filtered through Elena's gauzy curtains, painting the room in soft gold. I pulled on jeans and followed the sounds downstairs, pausing in the study doorway. Sophia sat at Elena's antique desk, wearing my button-down shirt from yesterday. She was writing something, her dark hair falling forward as she bent over the paper. The morning light caught silver threads I hadn't noticed before, making them shimmer like strands of starlight. The sight made my breath catch not just her beauty, but the unguarded intimacy of the moment. She must have sensed my presence because she looked up, meeting my eyes. Her smile wasn't the polished one from that first night at the door. This was something different, something real that crinkled the corners of her eyes and showed slightly crooked bottom teeth she usually hid. "Good morning," she said softly, setting down her pen. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to leave Elena a note." I moved closer, careful not to look at what she was writing. "Just saying thank you. For the house refuge, yes." She folded the paper carefully. "Among other things, Elena has always had an uncanny gift for creating the right circumstances, even by accident." "I'll make coffee," I offered, recognizing she needed a moment to finish her thoughts. "Take your time." In the kitchen, I went through the familiar motions of Elena's fancy coffee maker, measuring beans and adjusting settings. I heard Sophia moving upstairs, probably getting dressed. When she came down, she was back in her own clothes, simple black slacks, and a deep blue sweater that made her look both elegant and approachable. We moved around each other with new familiarity as I poured coffee and she found mugs, but there was an underlying awkwardness now. The spell of night had broken, leaving us to figure out what came next in the harsh light of morning. She accepted the coffee with a quiet "thank you," wrapping both hands around the mug like she needed its warmth. We sat at Elena's kitchen island, the silence stretching between us until she spoke. "I need to head back to the city today," she said carefully. "My lawyer needs signatures on some documents, and I have meetings about the property division tomorrow." She paused, taking a slow breath. "I have a life in transition waiting for me." I nodded, understanding but feeling disappointment settle heavy in my chest. "Will I started, then stopped, unsure how to ask without sounding demanding. "See me again?" she finished gently. The directness that had emerged between us last night was still there, making it easier to have difficult conversations. "Yes." She was quiet for a long moment, turning her coffee mug slowly between her palms. "I'd like that," she finally said. "But I need some time first. I'm just starting to figure out who I am outside of being Mrs. Valancourt. 20 years is A long time to play a role. I need to remember the woman underneath. I understand, I said, and I did, even though part of me wanted to argue that we could figure it out together. This isn't a rejection, she added, reaching across the counter to touch my hand. Just a request for patience while I navigate the divorce and rebuild my life. I need to do this part alone. Her fingers were warm from the coffee mug, and I turned my hand to hold hers properly. You don't have to explain. I respect your choice. The morning light caught her eyes as she smiled, making them shine with unshed tears. That's exactly why I hope you'll still want to know me when I'm ready. I spent the rest of Sunday cleaning Elena's house with the focused intensity I usually reserved for thesis revisions. Every surface was dusted, every window streaked free, her study reorganized with a precision that would make a librarian proud. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe just nervous energy, but by the time her key turned in the lock that evening, the place practically gleamed. James? She called out, dropping her conference bags in the entryway. The house looks amazing. Did something happen while I was gone? I emerged from the kitchen where I'd been obsessively reorganizing her tea collection. Welcome back, Professor Chun. Just thought I'd do a deep clean before heading out. She studied me with that penetrating gaze that made freshmen squirm in office hours. You seem different. More settled somehow. I busied myself with helping her unpack, carefully not meeting her eyes. How was the conference? Oh, the usual academic circus. She waved dismissively. Though I did get an interesting call from Sophia this morning. She wanted to thank me for the house sanctuary this weekend. Elena paused significantly. She sounded better than she has in months, more like her old self. My hand stilled on the stack of papers I was sorting. That's good to hear. Elena hummed noncommittally. The orchids look wonderful, by the way. Show me what you did with their care schedule? I gratefully seized the change of subject, walking her through the meticulous watering chart I'd created. We spent the next hour reviewing plant care and conference highlights, Elena mercifully not returning to the topic of Sophia. It wasn't until I was gathering my things that I noticed the business card on the kitchen counter. Heavy cream cardstock, elegant serif font. Sophia Valencourt, with her work contact information. When I turned it over, there were 2 words written. In precise handwriting, no regrets. I slipped the card into my wallet, where it stayed for the next 2 weeks. I wanted to confound myself taking out the card during study breaks, running my thumb over those 2 written words. But I respected her need for space, for time to sort through her transition. 13 days after she left, not that I was counting, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Coffee sometime this week? I'm usually in the city center between meetings. So we met at a quiet cafe tucked between law offices. She was already there when I arrived, wearing a charcoal suit that somehow made her look both powerful and approachable. For a moment, we both hesitated, the easy intimacy of that candlelit night feeling distant in the bright afternoon sun. Hi, she said softly, and something in her voice helped bridge the gap between then and now. Hi, I replied, sitting across from her. You look well. I feel clearer, she said after a pause. I've been seeing a therapist. Starting to untangle 20 years of being someone else's version of myself. That sounds intense. It is, but necessary. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, a gesture I remembered from that last morning. The divorce is moving forward. We're past the worst of the negotiations. I nodded, giving her space to continue. I've been thinking about your thesis, she said, surprising me with the shift. Did those editing suggestions help? They revolutionized my entire argument, actually. My advisor was impressed, wanted to know where I'd found such insight into contract language and power dynamics. That earned me a real smile, the kind that showed her slightly crooked teeth. What did you tell him? That I had an excellent editor who preferred to remain anonymous. We settled into easier conversation then, the initial awkwardness fading. She told me about apartment hunting, about rediscovering old hobbies. I shared stories about my students, about the way my thesis was finally taking shape. I'd like to Do this again, she said as we prepared to leave, but slowly. Intentionally. I'd like that too, I replied. No pressure, no rush, no regrets? She asked, echoing her note. None at all. Elena's department always went overboard with holiday decorations. Tonight, paper snowflakes dangled from light fixtures while tiny trees crowded every surface there. White lights reflecting in the wall of windows overlooking campus. I adjusted my tie, still not used to wearing one, and watched Sophia, charming a cluster of literature professors. She caught my eye across the room and smiled, genuine and bright. The deep blue dress she wore made her look luminous, confident, in a way that had nothing to do with designer labels or social performance. 6 months had transformed her from the exhausted woman who appeared on Elena's doorstep into someone who radiated purpose. Still can't believe you pulled this off, Elena said, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of wine. She handed me one, grinning, though I should have figured it out sooner. Those margin notes in your thesis revision. Pure Sophia, I'd recognize. Her contract negotiation style anywhere. I took a sip to hide my smile. You did figure it out pretty quickly. The double booking was genuinely accidental, she insisted, not for the first time. Though I maintained the universe clearly knew what it was doing. Your accidental matchmaking skills are unparalleled, I agreed, earning an elbow to the ribs. Elena's discovery had come 3 months ago, after she noticed familiar editorial patterns in my thesis drafts. She'd cornered me after a department meeting, more amused than upset. Her blessing came with gentle teasing about her inadvertent role as Cupid, but also genuine happiness for both of us. Across the room, Sophia was describing her new consulting firm to a captivated audience. Last month's divorce finalization had freed her to launch the business helping other women navigate high-stakes divorces with their autonomy intact. She'd found her calling in turning her experience into advocacy. She was at your thesis defense, wasn't she? Elena asked softly. Back row, trying to be discreet. I nodded. We'd attempted to keep things private until the divorce finished, but I'd needed her there. She said my hands only shook a little during the presentation. You were brilliant. Elena said, both of you are. Sophia made her way over to us, stopping to chat with colleagues who'd become friends over the past months. She'd integrated seamlessly into academic social circles, her natural intelligence finding common ground with Elena's peers. Dr. Morrison, she greeted me with a teasing smile, using the title I wouldn't officially have until graduation. Professor Chen, thank you again for hosting such a lovely party. Thank you for making an honest man of my favorite student, Elena replied dryly. Though I still maintain that double booking was completely unintentional. Of course it was, Sophia agreed, winking at me. Pure accident that changed everything. I remembered that stormy night 6 months ago, how we'd talked for hours about boundaries and expectations. It had never really been about the age gap or professional propriety. It was about 2 people choosing authenticity over safety, real connection over comfortable distance. Ready to head out? Sophia asked quietly. I know you have early office hours tomorrow. We said our goodbyes, Elena hugging us both with obvious affection. Outside, the December air was crisp and clean, campus quiet under a light dusting of snow. Sophia took my arm as we walked to her car, her heels clicking on the cleared pathway. I kept the business card, you know, she said suddenly. The one you returned to me with no regrets written on it. It's in my desk drawer at the new office. Any regrets now? I asked, though I knew the answer. Not one, she replied firmly. Though I'm glad we took our time, did this properly. She was right. The path here had required patience and careful coffee dates, long conversations, respecting her need to finish the divorce cleanly. But standing here now, watching snowflakes catch in her hair while she smiled up at me, I knew every careful step had been worth it. Sometimes, she mused, echoing my thoughts, the best mistakes are the ones that aren't mistakes at all. I pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. Like accidentally double-booked house-sitting? Exactly like that. If this story found you at the right time, subscribe and set reminders. Tomorrow's might be the nudge, the hug, or the promise you've been waiting for.